If God is supposed to be good, why am I going through so much pain? It's a question that can really shake your faith. If you've felt that, you're not alone. The Bible actually tackles this exact problem in the raw, powerful, and honestly pretty uncomfortable story of a man named Job. He was called blameless, and yet he lost everything. His story isn't just some ancient text. It's like a mirror for our own times when life just feels completely unfair. And it holds a surprising answer to one of the hardest questions we face. So to get this story, you first have to get the man, Job. The book opens and tells us he isn't just a good guy, but is blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. He was a man of integrity, a loving dad, and was also incredibly successful. By all accounts, he had it all, and in the logic of his world, he deserved it. Good things happen to good people. But then, the camera pulls back from Earth and zooms into the heavens. We see a scene in God's heavenly court, and standing there is a figure called the Satan, which in Hebrew just means the accuser or the adversary. This isn't the devil with horns and a pitchfork. Think of him more like a prosecuting attorney whose job is to test if people are the real deal. God points to Job as a stellar example of a faithful human, but the accuser just scoffs. He asks a pretty cynical question. Does Job fear God for nothing? Is his faith genuine, or is it just a business deal? The accuser basically argues that Job is only loyal because God has put a protective hedge around him and blessed him. Take away all the good stuff he bets, and Job will curse God right to his face. Then comes the part of the story that has bothered people for thousands of years. God agrees to the test. He lets the accuser tear down everything Job has, setting up this brutal experiment that becomes the heart of the story. You have to ask, why? Because the question on the table is a huge one. Is our faith just a response to being blessed? Or can it actually survive when suffering makes no sense at all? The devastation hits Job like a tidal wave. In one horrible day, a series of messengers, one after another, brings him news of unbelievable loss. His livestock are gone, his servants are dead, and in the final soul-crushing blow, a freak storm causes a house to collapse, killing all 10 of his children in an instant. Faced with this, Job's reaction is just astonishing. He grieves, tearing his robe and shaving his head, but then he falls to the ground and worships. He says something that echoes through the ages. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. In his absolute worst moment, Job doesn't curse God. He recognizes God is still in control. But the test isn't over. The accuser comes back and says, sure, but he's still got his health. So God allows a second round. Job is hit with painful sores from head to toe. His suffering is now constant and agonizing. His own wife, broken by it all, tells him to just curse God and die. But Job holds on, asking her, should we accept only good from God and not trouble? This is when his 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, show up. And for a moment, they do the best thing they'll do in the whole story. They just sit with him in total silence for 7 days and 7 nights, sharing his grief. The silence finally breaks, but it's not the same Job who speaks. This is a man who has been pushed right to the edge. He doesn't curse God, but he curses the day he was born, wishing he'd never existed. It's a raw, human cry from the pit of unbearable pain. And this is where his friends decide to help. They all work from a simple, clean formula. God is fair. God only punishes bad people. You are suffering like crazy. Therefore, you must have done something really, really bad. Eliphaz suggests it gently, asking, who that was innocent has ever perished? Bildad is a little more blunt, and Zophar is just plain cruel, telling Job he probably deserves even worse. For chapter after chapter, they hammer him, trying to get him to confess to some secret sin he swears he didn't commit. They're convinced there's a neat, tidy reason for his suffering. If something bad happens to you, you must have had it coming. This is that kind of comfort that just makes things worse. Instead of helping, they just blame the victim and completely misrepresent who God is. But Job won't back down. He knows he's not perfect, but he also knows he's done nothing to deserve this. He holds on to his integrity, and in his frustration, he demands something incredible: a face-to-face meeting with God. He wants to put God on trial and get some answers. It's easy to look down on Job's friends, but let's be honest, their logic is often our go-to. We all want the world to make sense. If you've ever felt totally misunderstood in your pain, or been handed a cheap, easy answer when you just needed a friend, let us know by liking this video. And subscribe for more dives into life's biggest questions. Job's speeches are a total whirlwind of emotions. One minute he's saying things like, "I know that my Redeemer lives," and the next he's accusing God of hunting him down like a lion. His words aren't neat and tidy. They're the real, honest cries of someone wrestling with God. This whole process of painful, honest questioning is called lament, and the Bible shows it not as a lack of faith, but a deep part of it. And then God finally answers, but not at all like Job or anyone else expects. He doesn't show up in a gentle whisper. He speaks to Job out of a massive storm, a whirlwind, matching the chaos in Job's soul with the wild, untamable power of the universe. And God's response isn't an explanation. It's a cross-examination. He doesn't give Job the neat answers he was demanding. Instead, he hits Job with more than 70 questions of his own. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. He asks Job if he's ever told the sun to rise or explored the bottom of the ocean. These questions aren't meant to shame Job. They're meant to shift his perspective. God basically takes Job on a virtual tour of the cosmos, from creating stars to the birthing cycle of mountain goats, from how weather works to the raw power of the ocean. He describes these massive, terrifying creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan, that exist completely outside of any human control or purpose. The point of all this is huge. God is showing Job that the universe is mind-bogglingly complex and does not revolve around one person's idea of fairness. Job's friends saw the world as a simple cause and effect machine. And Job, in his pain, also assumed the world had to run on a system of justice that he could understand. God's answer from the whirlwind completely shatters that idea. He reveals that his wisdom is so massive, so complex, and so far beyond ours that us trying to judge him based on our suffering is like a single ant judging a human for building a skyscraper. The book isn't here to answer the question, why do good people suffer? It never actually does. Instead, it tackles a much bigger question. Who is God? The answer is that God's wisdom is infinite and his perspective is eternal. The big reveal in Job is that we aren't meant to understand all the reasons for our suffering, but to trust the character of the God who is with us in it. Staring into the face of God's immense wisdom and power, Job's whole view changes. He says, "I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you." His faith, which was once built on blessings and principles, was now a real personal encounter with God himself. He repents, not because of some secret sin, but for his limited view and for accusing God when he only had a tiny piece of the puzzle. In the final chapter, God himself has the last word. He actually commends Job, telling the friends, "You have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has." He chews out the friends for their simplistic, harmful theology. Their tidy little formulas were wrong, but Job's messy, honest, painful struggle was honored. Then, in an act of pure grace, God restores Job. He gives him double the livestock he had before. He's blessed with a new family, 7 more sons and 3 more daughters, the same number he had lost. This isn't a reward for passing some cosmic test. It's a powerful symbol of God's restorative nature, a sign of hope that our suffering doesn't get the final say. So, what does this ancient story have to do with us? The book of Job gives us a better way to walk through our own hard times. First, it gives us permission to be brutally honest with God. It tells us our grief, anger, and questions are valid. God can handle our complaints. In fact, He seems to value the kind of faith that's brave enough to wrestle. Second, it's a huge warning against dishing out easy, judgmental answers for someone else's deep pain. We're called to offer our presence, not platitudes. And finally, the most important lesson from Job is that real faith isn't the absence of doubt, but trust right in the middle of it. It's an invitation to trust in God's wisdom and character, especially when life makes zero sense. It's a call to find meaning not in knowing the reason for the storm, but in knowing the God who promises to meet us in the whirlwind. What are your thoughts on this powerful book? Share your own perspective on faith and suffering in the comments below. Let's keep this important conversation going.